the topic addressed so far, there has been an elephant in the room that has often been mentioned but never given proper attention. It's time to talk about money. So, what exactly are grants? Grants are form of co-funding provided to an organization to implement a project or activity that aligns with the objectives set by EU institutions. They are the most common form of funding for no-profit organizations, and when people talk about European projects, grants are usually what they mean. There are two main types of grants you'll come across: action or project grants. These are the most well-known and widely used type of grants. They are awarded to support a specific project or activity that meets the goals of an EU program. Essentially, these grants help fund the actual implementation of your project, covering things like activities, resources, and other costs associated with your project's objectives. Operating grants. Unlike action grants, operating grants support the ongoing activities of specific organization whose work contributes to an EU policy. They are generally not tied to a particular project but are meant to be supported the day-to-day operation of organizations working in areas aligned with EU priorities. In the context of European project management, project grants are the most relevant for what will be focuses on. Now, let's dive deeper into how the European Union provides funding for projects through grants and how different forms of funding come with distinct reporting requirements. Reimbursement of eligible costs actually incurred. This is the most common form of funding. Here, the EU reimburses the actual costs you incurred in implementing your project, but only for those expenses deemed eligible. To get reimbursed, you must document and provide evidence for these costs, such as invoices or receipts. The reporting involves submitting these documents and ensuring everything is reported within the required time frame. Unit costs. This approach is used when a specific amount per unit is predetermined by the EU for eligible expenses. Examples included things like training section or materials. This funding will be based on the set price per unit, and the maximum number of units is defined in advance. Your reporting will involve verifying the number of units and applying the correct formula to calculate the total eligible amount. Flat rate or lump sum financing. In this method, a fixed percentage is applied to the total of your eligible expenses. It's a more simplified method where the EU will contribute a flat rate percentage of your cost. Reporting for this type of funding focuses on ensuring your document and expenses properly and apply the correct percentage to calculate the EU's contribution. Lump sum. Here, the grant covers either all or specific categories of eligible cost. The grant amount is often fixed in advance and is disbursed upon achieving certain milestones or outputs. Your reporting will focus on proving that the milestones or outputs have been successfully met, and this is what triggers the payment. Funding not related to the cost of operations. This type of funding is for organizations that are particularly important to the EU's missions. For example, a project supporting research or non-profit organization contributing to EU policy goals. This contribution is often not directly tied to specific expenses, but it meant to support the organization's ongoing activities. Reporting for this type of funding will generally involve ensuring that your organization continues to meet EU strategic objectives and fulfilling other ongoing requirements for funding. As you can see, different funding methods have different reporting obligations, and understanding the type of grant you're working with is crucial to managing and reporting properly. These distinctions will help ensure that your project is financially compliant and you are ready for necessary monitoring and reporting tasks. In some cases, you may encounter a situation where different types of contribution can be combined within the same program or project. This is actually the quite common European funding. The method used, whether it's unit cost, flat rate, or lump sum contribution, are defined by the specific programs called and managing authorities. The choice of which method to apply is usually determined by a few factors, including the type of intervention, the objectives of the project, and the financial system of the beneficiaries. The purpose is to select the most appropriate form of payment based on the nature of the project. For example, unit cost, flat rate, and lump sum contribution are often employed for activities that have well-defined and measurable outcomes. This makes them a good fit when the activities have specific, quantifiable results, like producing a certain output or paying for workdays at a set cost. On the other hand, fixed-rate financing is typically used to cover indirect project costs. These are costs that are not directly tied to the project itself, but are essential for its operation, such as general administrative costs or overhead costs. With fixed-rate financing, the indirect costs are reimbursed based on a predetermined percentage of the eligible direct cost. This percentage is set in advance by the managing authority. One advantage of using fixed-rate financing is that it helps simplify the reporting process, since you don't have to track each individual indirect cost. For example, you could simply report direct personnel cost as a default percentage of the other direct cost, which reduces the burden of documenting each expenses in detail. This flexibility allows for a more efficient way to handle different types of expenses across the project, especially when it comes to managing indirect costs or when predefined objective payments are appropriate for certain activities. So, it's essential to understand the funding models of your project, as the combination of contributions could affect how you plan your activities and report your expenses. Now, let's talk about eligibility of cost in European project, which is a key consideration when you're managing your project budget and seeking reimbursement for expenses. For a cost to be reimbursed under a grant, it must be deemed eligible. What does it mean exactly? It means that the cost must fall within specific categories that are approved for community co-funding under the program or call you're working with. There are a few important dimensions of eligibility to keep in mind. The type of activity. Certain activities are considered eligible, such as training section, knowledge exchange, product or service development, communication efforts, and more. You need to check that your activity aligns with that the program or call consider eligible. The type of expense. Not all costs will be reimbursed. Eligible expenses typically include things like travel expenses, staff wages or fees for external service providers, venues rental, printing materials, equipment purchase or rentals, and indirect costs. However, each program or call will have its own rules on which specific expenses are allowed. The geographical scope. Many programs will specify which countries or region project activities can be conducted in. If your project involves activity in countries outside the specified areas, this cost may not be eligible for the reimbursement. The time frame. The cost must be incurred during the project's implementation period. Generally, responsible expenses cannot apply to periods before the project starts or after it ends. Additionally, if the project has already begun or if activities have already been completed, those costs may be not eligible, and even if the payment have been made. In addition to meeting the eligibility criteria, cost for which reimbursement is sought must align with several general principles. These principles ensure that the costs are reasonable and appropriate for the project, and are crucial for maintaining the integrity of the funding process. Let's take a closer look at these principles. Relevance. The cost might align with definition, cost categories, quantities, limits, unit values, and total amounts explicitly outlined in your approved project budget and the relevant proposal call or program framework. Essentially, the cost must reflect what was agreed upon in your project proposal. Necessity. The cost must be essential for executing the project's proposed actions as detailed in your submitted and approved proposal. They should be directly connected to achieving the project objective, results, activities, and work plan. Costs that are not directly necessary for the execution of the project may not be reimbursed. Effectiveness. The cost must have been incurred by the beneficiary and should be clearly linked to the project actions. This means that the expenditure should have a direct impact on the implementation of the project. Verifiability. All reported costs must be verifiable. This means there should be sufficient documentation to validate the expenditures. For example, receipted invoices or equivalent documents should be provided. Alternatively, you are claiming lump sums, fixed rates, or unit cost. This should be explicitly outlined in the call and approved budget with appropriate documentary backing. Traceability. This principle is all about paperwork, keeping everything well organized and documented. The costs you report need to be traceable, meaning they should be easy to track from your financial records. If anyone asks how you spend that money, you should be able to point them to specific entries in your accounting, budgeting, and financial management records. These records need to be fully complete, so don't skip on the details. Legality. This one is not negotiable. Everything must comply with legal standards. This means that your reported costs must align with national budgetary laws, tax regulation, and social security standards. Think of this as a safety net. You want to make sure that you stay within the law to avoid any trouble down the road. Reasonableness. This principle is all about being smart with your spending. The costs you report should reflect economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. This means no unnecessary or excessive cost. You're expected to demonstrate economic reasonableness by finding ways to keep your expenditures low while still getting the results you need. The goal is to spend money wisely without sacrificing the quality of your project or the quantity of your planned activities. I hope you stay with me throughout. I know it seem complex, but it's a matter of getting used to and familiar with the concept. You can take a break now if you feel tired, because now we will talk about the budget. Alright, now that you have the basics of financial management in projects, let's dive into how to develop a project budget, and specifically how to approach a lump sum budget. A lump sum budget is straightforward. You get a fixed amount of money agreed upon in advance for a specific task, project, or portion of a project. The twist here is that you don't have to worry about actual costs incurred along the way. The payment you receive is predetermined, no matter what happens in the course of the project. Sounds simple, right? So, let's go back to the planning phase. Stay with me. You've already defined your project scope, deliverables, and expected outcomes. Once you've got this set, you can estimate the cost for each activity within that project. Let's break down what you need to consider when estimating your cost. Direct cost. These are the costs directly tied to your project activities. You need to account for things like materials, raw materials or equipment, labor, salaries or wages of your team, contractors, equipment, renting or purchasing specific tools or technology. You'll want to estimate how much you need for each of these categories to complete your task and reach your deliverables. Be realistic about this cost. It's all about planning for the essential. Indirect cost. These are the overhead costs that aren't linked to a specific activity but are still crucial for keeping the project running smoothly. Think about office rent, utilities like electricity, water, administrative support, HR, office supplies, etc. These costs tend to be more difficult to track since they are spread out over the course of the entire project, but they are just as important to account for. Now, let's introduce the concept of a work month. A work month refers to a number of working days in a typical month, generally between 22 and 24 days. This will help you estimate the effort, time, or cost for your employees or contractors over the course of the project. To make it easy, you'll use the work month as a unit of measure. For instance, if your team members will be working on a project for 3 months, you'll multiply the number of work days per month by the number of months to calculate the total effort or cost for their participation. It's time to dig into the specific category of cost that you'll need to include in your budget. Each category will help you ensure that every expenses is covered without needing to track every little thing during the project. Let's break it down. Personnel cost. These are the wages or fees for the people who will work on your project. This includes staff, your member, full-time or part-time, consultants or freelancers that may be hired for a specific task, like an expert in communication, IT, or design. You'll want to estimate how much each person will cost for the duration of the project. Make sure to account for any overtime or special payments as well. Travel cost. If your project involves any travel, whether it's your team attending meetings, conference, or site visits, you'll need to estimate. Transportation, like flights, trains, car rental, etc. Accommodation, such as hotel stays, Airbnb, etc. Per diem, daily allowance for meals and other expenses. This cost can quickly add up, so make sure to estimate realistically based on expected travel patterns. Other goods. This category includes any consumable or materials you need throughout the project, such as poster for promotional purposes, printed materials like brochures, reports, or handouts, office supplies such as pen, paper, or other project-specific items. Think about what physical materials you need to produce or purchase to make the project a success. Work and services. For any external services required, such as communication, promotion, dissemination services, like advertising or social media management, website development or maintenance, artistic fees for design and performers or other creatives' contribution to the project. This type of cost can vary depending on the complexity of the project, so make sure you have a clear estimate for each external service provider. Other costs. Sometimes there are small costs that doesn't really fit into the categories above, but they are still need to be covered. This might include miscellaneous expenses, such as postage, small equipment purchases, or unexpected costs. To ensure your budget is realistic and fixable, it's always a good idea to add a contingency buffer. This buffer helps cover any unexpected cost or price fluctuations. Usually, the contingency is about 5 to 10% of the total project cost. Now, sum it all up. Once you've estimated all the costs in categories above and added to the contingency buffer, you'll have your total lump sum job budget. This is the fixed amount you request or allocate for the project or task. And it should cover everything you need to successfully complete the work. In this slide, you can find an example of a budget. As you can see, you divide the budget by work packages and activities. Then you split the budget for that work package into different cost items. The best way to understand is to do so. So now it's your turn. Use the template for creating a budget that you will find in the long section of this learning unit. Use the categories we'll talk about and start estimating cost based on the project idea you provide. Remember, this is a lump sum budget, so your goal is to make sure that the total cost fits within the fixed amount you've been given. Don't worry if you're not sure about the exact amount right now, that's a perfectly normal. This is an exercise in estimation and practice. After all, in the real world, budgeting is a lot about making informed guesses and planning for the unexpected. You can pause the lesson and resume it when you finish. Set a timer of 30 minutes to complete the exercise. It's very optimistic, I know. When you finish, upload your budget in the forum section with the title Learning Unit 3 Budget. Okay, let's go back to reporting. There are different types of reports. First, let's talk about progress reports. These are often created midway through a project, typically around the halfway point of its lifetime. Think of it as a snapshot of where the project stands. A progress report is like checking your car's dashboard. It gives you a sense of how things are going, what's working, and what needs under adjustment. In a progress report, you will include an assessment of progresses against your original objectives and milestones. For example, have we met the goals we set for this quarter? What has been accomplished so far? What key activities were completed? What tracks are still going on? Challenges encountered. What difficulties have you faced? This helps you highlight potential risks or obstacles that may affect your timeline or budget. Adjustment made to the original plan. If you had to pivot or make changes, this is the place to document why those decisions were made and how they affect the project. The final report serves several key purposes. Evaluation of the overall project. How well did the project meet its original objectives? Did you achieve the goals you set at the beginning? Challenges faced and how they were overcome. What lesson did you learn during the project that can inform future initiatives? Lesson learned. It's important to reflect on both successes and the areas for improvement. This will help you or others avoid repeating mistakes and capitalize on successful strategies in future projects. Recommendation for future projects. Based on your experience, what advice would you give to others who are managing similar projects? Your final report is especially important for stakeholders and funders. They'll be using it to assess the impact and the project and to decide whether it was a success. This report encapsulates the project's outcomes and play a key role in strategic planning for future initiatives. So in summary, a progress report is a check-in. It shows where the project stands midway, highlights achievements, and addresses any adjustments made. A final report is a reflection. It looks like the whole project, evaluates the outcomes, shares lessons learned, and offers recommendations for the futures. Finally, the financial report. A financial report tracks the money side of the project, ensuring transparency and accountability. Just like any other report, this one gives stakeholders a clear view on how funds are being used throughout the cycle of the project. At its core, a financial report outlines the financial performance and status of the project. What does it mean? Essentially, it compares what was planned in terms of budgeting versus has actually been spent. It provides a snapshot of budget allocation, how much money was initially set aside for each area of the project, actual expenditures, how much was really spent up until this point, variances. This is where you highlight the difference between the planned budget and what's actually been used. The financial report serves as a vital tool for project managers and stakeholders to monitor how well resources are being used. For example, if a project manager notices that certain areas are constantly underfunded or overspending, they can take steps to reallocate funds or request additional support. This makes the financial report key in ensuring the project stays on track financially. That's all for today's class. Thank you for your engagement and participation in this unit. If you have any questions or doubts about it, you can use the forum to discuss with me and your colleagues. See you in the next unit.